It's a beautiful day in
We're
the
on, we're on our
neighborhood
third episode.
of Hustler and Boomers.
We're on our third episode of Boomers and Hustlers, and I think I'm pretty excited as to where this is going. I mean, we're experimenting with a lot of different ways of putting the videos out, experimenting with a lot of back end things, thinking about and brainstorming things that we could do to our videos to make them a lot more better, a lot more relatable. And so we're doing a lot of work on that. However, in today's news, Dave, they have announced that the COVID vaccine has officially released. It is coming to Canada in about a week, and people are going to be pretty much they have to take it, right? What do you think about the COVID-19 vaccine? And what do you think about the government telling people to take it?
I don't like the idea of the government telling us to take it. I do believe we should have a choice to take it.
Mm.
And those high risk individuals, if they want to take it, have it available for them. Yet when we get into the line of you have to take it, that's where I guess I got a little bit of pushback until I learn a little bit more about it. Yet it is remarkable that after 6 to 9 months, we've been able to come up with some remedies. And congratulations to the powers that be that put it together. I've got a dark side view of it also. Yet, are you going to be in line to do you right now? Do you take a flu shot?
Oh, absolutely not. I'd say I'm being a young person, someone who's been sporty most of his life, uh, who's been active, who has done and eaten pretty dodgy foods, like done many different things. I'd say I have a pretty strong immune system, right? And so whenever I get sick, well, I rarely get sick in the first place, so I don't have too many problems with flus and stuff. I'd say that you know I don't really take any flu shots. I have taken the ones that were mandatory in middle school or elementary school that you had to take, like SARS or any of those things, just because I didn't want to get suspended, right? However, other than that, I don't think I'd ever taken flu shots. And whenever I do get sick, I usually don't take medicine at all. I never take Tylenol. I never take Advil, none of those antibiotics. I don't really take medicine, right? And so it's I don't know, it's just something I don't do. However, in terms of this COVID vaccine, as a young 20-year-old, Dave, I want you to just think about it. Like, imagine not being able to go out and meet your friends. Imagine not being able to travel. Imagine not being able to go to a party or just go on a Saturday evening to the bar and have a drink with your friends and stuff. As a 20-year-old, just imagine that. Like, for me, what I want is for this whole COVID thing to end, because I'm urging myself to just go out there, meet people, socialize, because we are social human beings. And I really, really want to do that. And so, I mean, can you relate in that sort of respect? What if when you were 20, Dave, you were told by the government that you're not allowed to go outside, that you have to wear a mask, that you have to stay in lockdown and you have to isolate yourself for an X number of days, and it's been months now? What would you do in that situation as a 20-year-old, and how would you feel?
Well, again, I would be feeling claustrophobic, a little bit like a rebel, maybe a lot like a rebel. And so there's definitely an empathy that goes out to the young ones who are experiencing this. There's also an empathy to the seniors and the elderly who are perhaps even in a more not only frightening and fear infused state, because they're not even allowed to circulate. They're in prison, and the senior centers are in lockdown, and they're doing it for their own good. And yet there's people who have been married for decades and can't see each other. When they're in the hospital, there's no more visiting. And so it definitely has hit different people in different ways. And I'm listening to you. Yet what happens there is this listening becomes part of the uh, silent majority, and the people that just want this done can run gunshot over everybody. And so that's the balancing component, is that we are a land of laws, yet it doesn't mean the laws are right all the time. And sometimes we have to speak up, and sometimes we have to have the information. And so dialogue, respect, these are important things. Yet I sometimes wonder whether there isn't an agenda, whether there isn't a control component that just wants to jam things through without giving people the right. You being forced to take COVID, you being forced to take things that they know better than you. It's proven out over years that the government doesn't necessarily know best all the time. And
Oh
sometimes it
yeah.
takes people who are going to be rebel rousers, people who are going to be um, standing up for injustice. Because let's face it, our friends in the South right now have done a lot of nasty things over the years. They have documented cases of testing on people without permission. They have done atrocities around the world, and they are so influenced by corporatocracy where the lobbyists jam things through and people who don't step up get slaughtered. That's the
No.
sheeple generation. And
Oh.
so I'm encouraging you as part of the boomer generation, of the hustler generation, to step up, be heard, yet make choices and get informed and be part of the positive change.
And so basically, this whole agenda that the government's pushing, right? Like with the whole COVID vaccine, that you have to take it, and it's something that's mandatory. And I mean, I don't know what the rules would be, or what sort of penalty would be given for not taking it. However, in terms of the COVID vaccine, actually, there was a few tests done, and after a few of the results, they found that people with allergies actually develop Bell's palsy, I believe, and so half their face tends to freeze. It is a curable, like sort of condition, and it does go away. However, it does show that there's a bit more research to be done before they actually put it out there, so that they make it safer alternatives for people with allergies, people with disabilities, people with conditions, and so it could be safe for everyone. Before just giving it out and making everyone shoot their arm up with some COVID vaccine, right? And I mean, I heard a lot of different perspectives on it, especially from my younger generation. Uh, they a lot of people have said, like, you're down to put drugs in your system. You're down to shoot heroin. You're down to take coke. You're down to do ecstasy for pleasure, for fun. But you're not down to take a COVID vaccine that's for your health, right? So it sort of sparks the idea that people are willing to harm themselves through the form of drugs, and they are unwilling to take the COVID vaccine, which, honestly speaking, is a fair point. I mean, what do you think about that? Like, that's what a lot of people have been saying on social media, right? That was a lot of conversations on that.
Well, again, you're absolutely right. There's people who do a lot of harm to themselves. There's a lot of people who experiment with a lot of things. Right now, there's a stock coming out that's a derivative of LSD, and it's to help people with bipolar or schizophrenia. And so things that used to be against the law, right now you're seeing in America, they're finally legalizing marijuana. Marijuana tends to have a relaxing, pain reducing effect for many people. 40 years ago, when it was outlawed, because there was a group run by mainly DuPont who wanted to get hemp out of the supply chain. They don't like the fact that hemp can be grown in a very strong type of rope. They wanted to replace it with nylon, and they wanted all the government contracts. So they were able to create some mandates to wipe out hemp, and therefore marijuana, and therefore filling a lot of the jails with people that were smoking marijuana harmlessly, because marijuana as a tea, marijuana as a pain reducer has been around for hundreds of years. So what people tell you is something that you've got to be aware. They have been abusing their powers in the government for many decades. You, as somebody who can build your own immunity, who builds up your own way of knowing your body, even a drug these days, it's what, 99% efficacy, 90% efficacy. That means 10% of the people might not have a very good response. You might get ball syndrome. So there is something that is a little amiss right now. I'm not a big fan of government or people who are in the government telling me what to do every way of the way. Yet, on the other hand, I do like the laws, the driving laws. You drive a certain speed, you drive on the certain side of the road. So there's a sweet spot in this, and then there's a spot where you go overboard. We're going to find out where overboard is. That's why I wanted to know whether you're going to take it. I know my personal opinion. I don't want to take it. My parents, they want to take it. When I came back to Canada, first thing they got me to do was to drive them to go get their flu shot. And they all said, aren't you going to get your flu shot? I said, I haven't had a flu shot ever. Why would I need one? I'm going to go and do my running. I'm going to do my vitamin C. I'm going to do my exercises. I'm going to do my prayers. I'm going to do my self-care program. They're going to be in lineup to get the shot when they're ready for it. Is that suggesting, yes, they are more perhaps in the sheeple component of life? I would say perhaps yes. Is that done in a really derogatory term? No, because it's their choice. They're doing their research. They're making a choice. Now, are they being influenced and manipulated? You're damn right they are.
Oh, yeah.
As we were, when you talk about the eating, when we were growing up, they had, oh, you should be eating this type of bread and this type of milk. And what has this shown? It's shown that all that was written and designed by lobbyists who wanted you to eat their products and use their products.
Yeah. And so, I mean, with this COVID vaccine thing, it's a bit hard to judge. Would your perspective perhaps change if, let's say, scientists came out and said that, it will really help you become immune to COVID? Like, even if you get in contact with somebody that has COVID, you're basically immune. It won't really affect you. That the virus will just die in your system. Would your perspective change on it if instead of the government was telling you to take it, scientists were actually encouraging you to take it?
Unfortunately, or fortunately, Anish, just because a scientist tells me something doesn't make it right. That comes from my finance background, where we used to have Mr. PhD from Harvard come up with a strategy why the dollar yen would go up. And then we had Mr. PhD from Stanford telling us why it would go down. So you had these two super brainiacs who are PhDs, they're doctors, they're specialists. Some of them even won Nobel Peace Prizes, telling me what would happen. Guess what?
Oh, wow.
That is part of the challenge we have right now in our world, is that we have been inundated with, in the last 4 years, is there's facts and there's alternative facts. And that is the world that you, as a hustler, is going to have to navigate much more than me, because I'm probably going to be out fishing soon. Yet that is a whole arena of playing what I call the 50 shades of gray, because things aren't necessarily black or white anymore. There is so much gray in almost everything we say, everything we do. And that is creating chaos for a lot of people. It's creating confusion for a lot of people. And it's allowing a few people to get away with grand theft, grand larceny, and grand acts of disservice.
I can agree with your point and I can see where you're coming from in terms of like not being able to, take the government's word for it, right? However, just to like for the people who do have COVID, and I've experienced people that I know who've had COVID, but they pretty much got cured like right away. I mean, they tested positive, but they were completely fine, right? So majority of the cases do go like that. However, for the people who do have COVID that are maybe on life support and that are in a big problem and are on the verge of death, do you think that they should take the vaccine, or do you think that they should fight it off? What do you think about them?
Again, that's really up to them. And that's,
okay.
It's like so there's going to be ways to save their life. And if this is part of the way to save their life, then a medical professional will provide that input. And if you're going to go and use a hospital and that's your choice, then you will have the choice or that prescribed remedy for it. And that is, again, part of a world we live in, is that up until a certain point, it's your choice. But if you pass out, then it's going to be maybe the doctor's choice or the expert's choice to prescribe. And whether then if you pass over or you recover, whether you're grateful or you're angry, those are all the things that are part of the human experience. Whether your family is going to be attacking and want to sue the hospital, that will again be their reaction to a tragedy. And so that's
Yeah.
a little bit about what we're experiencing right now at such an accentuated place now, is because again, hundreds of thousands of people are dying every day right now, and that
Yeah.
is a tragedy, and that is something that it's not sad, and we can bring compassion into it. Hopefully we can move forward with some hope and some faith that there are good, professional, educated experts who are moving us forward through this pandemic and out the other side, where there's going to be a whole lot of learning and hopefully a society that can evolve into perhaps more patience, compassion, and kindness. That would be some of the good things that could come from this.
Do you think like I mean, the question just popped into my mind as we're talking about this, and I think it's a pretty good question to get from the boomer standpoint. Do you think that the government did a good job in handling COVID thus far in Canada? I'd say in Canada right now.
I believe we've been very fortunate in one way, particularly, and that is communication has been robust. It has come across so far from my observation, authentic,
Mhm.
and
Okay.
best practices have been followed. And I think
Yeah.
we're fortunate because we have seen our friends or leaders from down south show what not to do. And so if you were to give grades, I believe our guys get B pluses. I think their guys get D minuses.
In the
And
U.S., right? Down
yes,
in the U.S. they get DMA.
yes.
Okay. Okay.
And
Yeah.
so
Interesting.
when I hear a lot of like, again, this is my bias, America number one, America number one, because that's what I've experienced so often in my journey, traveling, working, and being in the fields that I've been into. There is a component that I'm proud to be a Canadian.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to disagree with your take on this, all right?
Sure.
And I'm gonna call bullshit. And the reason why is because I think the government could have done a way better job in terms of handling COVID. I think if there was certain decisions that had been made in the past, it could have alleviated potentially more people who have caught the virus and more people who have died. I think for one, the government should have had a plan in place from the very beginning, from March when the lockdown started, for like a 6 months to 12-month plan, like I'd say 6 to 10 month plan, where by November, December, they'd plan on opening everything back up again, right? But in that 6 to 10 month period, they would consistently stay in lockdown. So they wouldn't relieve some of the, because earlier this well, in mid this year around August, we were actually at 23 cases a day. So we were actually doing pretty well in Ontario, right? Like the numbers were going down significantly. We were looking at some of the lowest rates of COVID-19 per day, and we were experiencing like 0 deaths a day as well, right? So it was going really, really well. However, the government went to the stage 2 or 3 and then started opening things back up again, right? And that's when numbers started to go up again. So now they've climbed to like 2,000 and stuff. So they're hitting peaks right now, right? So COVID is hitting its peak stage right now just because of that. So I think that if like we waited till 0 and sort of gave it a little bit more time even after 0 to isolate, we could have been done with this by now. However, the way the government sort of did it was they just kept rushing to open things. Like they closed things, they kept the control, and they followed the rules for a short period of time, and they did everything right up until August. I think after August, they fucked their whole strategy up and they completely messed up, and they sort of spiraled it out of control in terms of opening things up, opening gyms up, opening food places up. And I don't know, Doug came up with some bullshit rules as well along the way where, you can't eat after 12 a.m. at a restaurant, you can't order drinks after 11 p.m. Like, I have no idea how that stops COVID-19. I mean, does COVID-19 like slip in drinks, or like do they slip COVID-19 through food or something? Like I don't understand that. And I remember I was talking to my friend about this, and we were just like, this makes no fucking sense, because we're just here. We were actually at a restaurant to watch a fight, right? And we were following all the rules. We had our masks on and everything, and we were sitting outdoors and we were watching the fight. And I wanted to order a sip. I'm sorry, a drink as well as some food, some fries and stuff to enjoy my fight. However, they said they closed down their kitchen at 11 p.m. and then the fight didn't actually start. So it was 12 p.m. now, and they had a curfew to close at 12 p.m. So me and my friend had to rush home, right? Because we couldn't watch the fight now, and we were gonna miss it because we got kicked out of this restaurant. And by the time we got home, the fight was done, right? So we were just like, what the hell is going on? Why is Doug doing this? Like it makes no sense what Ontario had done, a few of the decisions. And so I guess personally, my score, I would say that we get a C minus because we could have done better. There are a few areas where we did do well. And for like the first half part of COVID, the first phase, we actually did pretty well to get the numbers down to 20, right? And I was I was actually excited that the numbers were 20. I was like, this is going to end. I'm going to be able to go back to school for my last semester. I'm going to be able to enjoy. And then, we just decided to let loose. And so I would definitely give Canada a C minus, and I would give the United States an F because I feel like in the United States, people don't hold each other accountable enough. They don't hold influencers accountable. Like Jake Paul holding a 300-person party, he's still running free. He's still able to hold more parties, and he's still able to do more things. And he's a big influencer who has a huge amount of influence to many young people around the United States. And the government seems to have a blind eye towards that, and many other things like parties and stuff that are going on there. Like it's insane how they're handling it. So I'd give them a total F. They're completely failing. They suck at this whole COVID-19 resolution. That's what I would say.
Very good. So let's do our little transition into the next topic, which is all about the way some Canadians have responded. And what's your opinion about this case?
Adamson barbecue. I mean, he actually like blew up on social media. He was all over all the biggest, social media accounts on Instagram in Toronto. And so he completely just, blew up because of his message. And for those of our viewers who actually don't know about Adamson barbecue, it's a little, barbecue restaurant, like a restaurant located in Etobicoke. And so what this guy did, as you can see, the guy who's getting arrested in this picture in the red, he is actually the owner of the restaurant. And so what he decided to do in the second lockdown, or in the recent lockdown that the government had put down for 28 days, I believe, he decided to say, fuck it, I'm staying open. And there's nothing the government can do about that. Right. And so his whole position was that the government is trying to keep control, this whole mentality that, they're trying to get like they're hurting the businesses, and local businesses should stand up against the government to have their freedom. And there was people comparing North Korea, saying we're in Canada, not North Korea. Like, come on, give me a break. Like, let me open up my business. Let me operate safely. Like, I get his message. However, I mean, he blew up. And as you can see here, on this GoFundMe, he was able to raise more than $300,000 for his legal fees, I believe. Was it his legal fees?
Well,
his legal defense fund.
Yeah, let me just reframe it. It wasn't him. It was some guy in Vancouver who set up the fund for him. And then we have 6,400 Canadians, presumably, making donations. It's been shared over 40,000 times. They've got 6.6 thousand followers. And this is a GoFundMe site that allows people to contribute to his defense. Their target is $500,000, and people are taking up the cause. What's your view about that? Have you got your visa out? Are you going to give this guy some money, or what are you going to do there?
Hell no, I would never waste my money to help this guy out. I mean, like, it's not even personal. Like, I don't hate the guy. I don't really know the guy, like, other than what I've seen of him on social media. However, it makes no sense to me to support this random person, right? I mean, his message, I don't really resonate with it, right? So I guess these 6,400 Canadians do. but it literally doesn't make sense to me why people would even give him $1. Like, he's doing this to himself initially by not listening to the government, breaking open the barricades, going against what the police say and some of the rules and restrictions. And he's keeping his shop open. And you can see there are crowds of people in his restaurant just standing there eating. Some don't have masks, some are not even following restrictions, and they're literally running like it's a fucking Saturday, and they want to have some fun, right? So it literally doesn't make sense. Like I mean, his whole campaign where he went against the government, had those signs up. It sort of puts people at risk in terms of uh, catching the virus. That would be my take. What do you think about it? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on it.
Well, again, it's a breaking the law and
Yeah.
feeling that the law is unfair, having conversations with his tribe, and deciding to do something that was going to get a lot of attention.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sure he's shocked about how much attention he got, because there has been 6,500 Canadians who have invested in what they see as unfair practices, unfair processing of the law. And so that is one of the things that we do in Canada, is that sometimes some people will break the law so that they can challenge the law.
Oh yeah. And he
And
gained a lot of publicity from it as well.
absolutely. So that's one of the things that we wanted to bring up to have a conversation. We invite any of our listeners to put your comments. And we know that there's going to be some people that don't want to listen to the other side of the view. Yet one of the things that we believe in Boomer and Hustler, Hustler and Boomer, is that your opinion, by having a voice of it, we can then perhaps find a best way forward. And this is an example of what some people will do, some entrepreneurs will do, is that they will break the law to potentially be part of changing the law. And
Yeah.
the fact that we now have a GoFundMe type of process, you as an entrepreneur, you might decide in the next year to use GoFundMe to maybe finance one of your passion projects. That's how I look at it. I've been involved in different types of online funding, and we've built water facilities in Africa and in India. And so GoFundMe can be used as a way, when you have a limiting belief that you can't have any money, that you can actually go and finance a passion project. So that's what I learned from it, is how quickly something can go viral.
Yeah.
Breaking the law is a part of that. He's got one heck of a lot of PR. And
Lots of PR.
it leads us into our next sort of topic, which was, is there anything like bad PR? And what is
Does
your
bad
view about?
publicity exist? I mean, what I would say is no. And like, let me tell you why now. I'd say bad publicity does not exist. And of course, there are things that you can do that will get you publicity that are terrible and could pretty much destroy your outer view, what people think about you, and how people perceive you out in the world, right? Yeah, like you put Logan Paul up here. Uh, Actually, my story with Logan, like my experience with learning about Logan Paul as a person and as a YouTube channel, and just becoming aware of who he is, was through his suicide forest incident, where he pretty much exploded all online and people were trying to cancel him. And he actually basically filmed a dead body in the suicide forest that was hanging from a tree, and posted it to social media for his young audience to see. And yeah, you can see it right here, has been involved in several controversies, most notably in relation to visit to Japan, during which he filmed a corpse of a man who had hung himself. So that's a very prime example of something that got him a tremendous amount of publicity. However, Dave, one thing that pretty much sparked and planted the seed for him through this was being a very hated individual online. And being hated could actually be really, really good, because you become the public enemy. Now, he's very, very fortunate, because guess what? KSI, on the other hand, was into boxing, right? And he was looking for the next best target for his boxing career, who was hated. And Logan Paul, being from the United States, being somebody who's a big YouTuber that has a tremendous amount of followers, and being somebody who has the US market wrapped around his finger, was somebody who made sense to him. And the reason why he called out Logan Paul was because he was so hated and so well known and very relevant at the time. So Logan Paul being relevant, I had no idea about who he was before that whole suicide situation. And after that, I knew exactly who he was, and many other people knew exactly who he was. And from then on, he was able to get into a fight with KSI, which kept him relevant and diverted people's attention away from what had happened to him. So his bad publicity actually opened doors for him. It got him like, more opportunities to venture off into different aspects. Now he's fighting Mayweather. I mean, who would have knew a guy who could have been canceled 3 years ago or 2 years ago for filming a dead body is now fighting one of the greatest boxers of all time?
So
Like,
this reminds me of the
yeah,
way that WWE became a global phenomena. They've always used the heel. They want to have the antagonist, the bad side. This goes back to Hollywood. Does Hollywood not, in every single movie, every Rocky, every movie, there's got to be a bad guy. So this is bringing the control of creating the story, creating the narrative into your real life. So if you're going to have a business, you have to have an enemy. So that's what Intel does. They make somebody, Oracle, an enemy, or Apple used to make companies an enemy. Pepsi used to have Coca-Cola as an enemy. And so this has become so infused in society, and that is part of maybe today's lesson is if you're really going to do well in business, you want to have what are either going to be enemies, but these days, the top tech companies call them frenemies.
yeah,
And so in the public, they seem like they're the target we're going to go after, yet maybe in private, it's actually creating, let's do the Pepsi challenge or the Coca-Cola challenge, or right now, Logan Paul doing the Mayweather challenge so that they both can make a couple of $100 million. And
yeah,
so being the villain can be very lucrative. And so if you're
absolutely. Like,
aware of
even,
that, as 20-year-old, being aware of that for your business, being Mr. Nice Guy doesn't work. Being the enemy of the people gives you some great branding.
absolutely, just like Adamson Barbecue. I mean, this guy came out, he did what nobody expected, and he gained so much publicity from it. His restaurant's page is at 80,000 followers because he was everywhere, all over news channels, CP24. Everyone was talking about this guy, and he had the publicity from a message that was so controversial, that was so unaccepted by so many people. However, when you saw videos of his restaurant being open during the lockdown earlier, this lockdown, so around November, uh, people were lining up in crowds to get some of his barbecue, and people were posting videos about it, people were posting images. I mean, he was the relevant hot topic of the GTA Ontario like area, like in Canada. I mean, he was very, very well known, probably even across Canada. And he's a little restaurant in Etobicoke, which is not even a well-known city, right? So it's crazy to think that even with his sort of message, whether it was controversial or not, was able to elevate his business to the next level. And now, even after coronavirus, he will continue to thrive, and he will continue to provide people with the food that they, I guess, love. I mean,
Well, guess this is a little bit about what you talk about in your marketing and your target marketing and your avatar. Is that before none of us knew about Adamson. Now 6,600 people have actually sent him money. He doesn't have just some fans. He's got people that actually have invested in him and his cause. Even him keeping 10% of them is part of his movement as he moves forward. That's pretty phenomenal. And yes, that is a little bit about how the world revolves now. If you're going to take up a fight, sometimes you will go and you'll create this cancel culture.
yeah.
And it's orchestrated. Another one, the way it's been used, and maybe it's not a full topic for today, but you might remember one of the top internet sensations was this lady.
Oh, yeah.
And so what she was able to do is she had these infamous sex tapes that got out, but she's been spinning it for the last 5 years, and now she's got a sexual abuse. And so she's looking to use some of these techniques, some tools of being hated and then reborn. And it
Yeah,
comes right out of the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell talks about. And it's really fascinating that if our listeners want to go and see how to redeem yourself, check out that, because that's what this chat is about, is expressing oneself, yet also leave with a couple of tips. Like we've shared some tips on the way that people are building their brand. We're sharing some tips to clean up your brand if it's been abused, or you might actually be the number one hated person, because that can be a great position to be an influencer in today's world.
absolutely, absolutely. Like even like people like Jordan Peterson, I believe his name is. He's a professor at U of T. He was very vocal about his position on the gender and whether there are more than two genders, and he gained a lot of publicity from that and a lot of hate as well. But that also propelled his career in terms of boosting his number of following and getting more people on his social platforms as well. I mean, there's so many countless examples out there where people are saying very controversial things, becoming very hated, and then using that hate and that sort of attention to their advantage to become relevant in the social media eye, right? So I guess it's being strategic about how you would like to position yourself out there and seeing whether you could create out of the hate a potential monetization or following that you can actually benefit off of for your social media accounts. So I mean, it's a pretty
I
cool little
I think we
strategy.
could have a separate chat about Jordan Peterson's rise, yet also some of the difficulties had with some drugs in the last 6 months that have almost killed him.
Oh
And
wow.
there are a number of drugs that are used to treat bipolar and schizophrenia that have side effects. And this is, again, reams very loudly for me that often drugs that are prescribed have effects for supposed to be 1%. Yet 1% of a million people are a lot of very hurt people
Oh
because
yeah.
of the side effects.
You know,
And that's,
there was actually a family in the United States that put out Oxycontin and they would overprescribe people with it and people would become completely addicted to it because, they just kept prescribing and they used to pay off doctors so that people can shop at their pharmacies and they raked in billions of dollars doing that. And they started the whole Oxycontin pandemic, as they called it, in the United States back in the day. I forgot the family's name, however.
well, it's something
Uh,
maybe we will do a session on it, because I
oh,
think it's very
I would love to.
topical, and it's something that might reach out to help people too, because we could put in some links that if you are right now addicted or a victim or feeling just totally out of your mind about it, we can put you in touch with some recovery organizations, some stress organizations, and get some help out there. So I think today's session, where we really wanted to talk about Logan Paul and is any publicity negative, the case study of Adamson's, and then the whole idea of what you're going to do with COVID has been pretty well covered. Any
Yeah.
last thoughts or insights that you want to share with our listeners at all?
I would like you to actually give your like sort of last little take on whether bad publicity is true, like starting with a yes or no, and then maybe a little explanation as to why. Because I'd love to know the boomer's perspective in terms of publicity in social
Well,
media, especially.
these days, definitely, there is nothing like bad publicity. There are spin doctors out there that will spin it, spin it, spin it. And so almost any story can be spun. And this isn't new. This goes back to some of the stories of the famous Kennedy brothers and the stories that they had to spin with Marilyn Monroe and different types of behavior. So spin doctors, publicity these days, there's some people that, oh, again, now that we're in the whole alternate facts world, so with spin, 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 definitely could come some benefit from it. If you want to be public, then there are ways to do it in crazy ways from my perspective. Yet these days, that's one of the things that the world, as the world turns, and it's turned pretty much on its head since I've been around. And that is either you're going to continue to spin and go with it, or you're going to find yourself run over, or you're going to find yourself with the sheets pulled over your head. Yet these days, PR is something that is, it is what it is.
Yeah, I guess it did. I mean, however the public takes it and however you're able to overcome it, I mean, there's always a way out to really monetize off of any sort of PR. And that wraps up our whole Boomers and Hustlers take in today's episode. Make sure you leave a comment down below for your thoughts. And if you have any future conversations that you want me and Dave to talk about, also, suggested guests that you would like on the show as well. Be sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and make sure you turn on the notification bell so that you're notified whenever we post a video.